All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. Excited to share this content with you. Um, I think we can all hear and see the screens okay. So you can see here, this is a picture of just some of our clients back in the day when we used to do on-site training before COVID, but it's cool to see all the smiling faces at our clients here. But what we're going to do here today is talk about how to take your sales team to the next level. And before we hop in, I want to just tell a little story of a text message that I just got yesterday of a client that's been with us for 4 years. And it's a residential commercial roofer just north of West Palm Beach, Florida. And he texted me screenshots of when he first started back in 2016, I believe. And he closed $1 million that first year. So they were a small company. And then he texted me a screenshot of 2017. It bumped up to $6 million. And then he texted me a screenshot of what they're looking at doing this year, $15 million. And I was just blown away about that progress and that growth that they've seen in just a short amount of time, despite the pandemic and different things like that. So I'm excited to share this content with you. And I've seen the best of the best out there of a roofing company, HVAC companies, a whole bunch of different kind of construction companies. So a lot of the content that we're teaching here is really just from other successful people and sharing it with a broader community. So to hop in today, what we're going to be talking about, let me see here we go. Number one, we have to identify the problem. What's going on with our sales team? Why we might have a slow sales team or our sales team isn't hitting our objectives. So we're going to start off there, and then we're going to go to what top construction company sales team have that really help the team get to the next level and that pathway to get there. 3, what killer sales meetings look like. How do they structure their weekly sales meetings? How the best companies are able to forecast the X factor that it really accelerates growth. And then we'll talk about, another case study, Best Roofing. And I'll also mention, the other company as well. So let's hop in. What's the problem? I would say this has to do with the problem in the construction industry in general. Most people, when they get started with Followup CRM, they come to us and they say, we're on paper. We're in, sticky notes. We are on spreadsheets. Maybe we're using a system, but it's not really built for sales. And so we call this the laggard problem. And if you're familiar with a bell curve, which is what we have here, a bell curve is an analysis of the market, and clients and people fall into some of these categories of the bell curve, right? And so right at the beginning, we have the 2.5% of innovators, then early adopters, early majority, late majority, and then laggards. Now, as an industry, the construction industry, it's really hard to make change within the industry. So typically we fall where in the laggard 16%. Now, some of you that caught the vision of Followup early in the beginning, I'm going to say you guys are actually the early adopters and innovators of the construction industry. The way I like to describe it, that the construction industry is just entering the 90s, right? Discovering technology and how it's transforming the business. So as a construction industry in general, so if we looked at the entire market, the construction industry would fall in the laggards. But of the laggards, you could even drill in deeper and create another bell curve. And if you're a Followup CRM client, then you're going to be in this early phase. And if you're in this early adopters, innovators phase, what does that help you do? That helps you get ahead of the curve rather than being in the early majority or late majority, which might be in the next 3 to 5 years or 3 to 10 years. You've been using innovative technologies for years before everybody else. So it's really a differentiator in the market. So that's the problem, and if we're just late to adopting technology and neglecting sales and sales enablement and helping our sales team capture more contracts, then that is part of the bigger problem here. So diving a little bit deeper, I've flown to hundreds of companies before COVID, of course, and we sat in thousands of sales meetings on Zoom and in person from companies ranging from $1 million to 100 million. And what I saw was a couple of things when it comes to sales meetings and sales organizations. Number one, they might not even have a sales organization. They might have people that do both sales and project management, but really that's two different functions. And that's one of the things I found, right? And here's an amazing statistic. Only 35% of these companies had a designated sales leader. And what that means, it could be a sales manager, VP of sales, head of estimating, the person who is responsible for driving that part of the business, if that makes sense. So having one person responsible for that is critical, and only a third of them had that. The next thing here, 30% of these companies had a standing sales meeting, meaning Monday morning at 9 o'clock, like a ritual. Do we have that standing sales meeting? Only a third of them do. Maybe they had a monthly sales meeting, which is, if you're having a monthly sales meeting, you're only having, 10 a year because you're probably not during the holidays, or maybe you do, but 12 a year at max. It's really hard to manage a sales organization and have that meeting only 12 times a year. So that is a huge issue. The next thing that we found here, which is amazing, 25, so even less, had goals established for the year. And that's basically steering the ship without an udder, right? And that's the problem. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know how you're going to get there, right? So if only 25% had growth goals established or any kind of goals, then it's really tough to have a sales team that's rowing in the right direction. Here we go. 15% understood what a pipeline is and knew their closing ratio. These are two very important sales metrics that help you throttle it up or throttle it back, depending on your activity in the market. 27% is the average salesperson turnover rate, meaning you have a team of 10, a third of them will be leaving within a year, right? So if you have that kind of salesperson turnover rate, then it's critical to understand that what does that mean? In 3 years, you're basically turning over your entire sales team if you have 10 people, which is a factor that you need to consider when designing your sales organization and your team in general, right? I believe the current statistic is people stay in their jobs 18 months on average, in 2020. So it's a problem. And then only 5% had a documented, defined sales process in place. And so the last 2 points kind of relate to one another, right? If you are turning over your sales team every 3 years entirely, and you don't have a sales process in place that's documented, how are you bringing people up to speed? It takes 6 months, it takes a year till there. And so what you can see here is that we're running in place, right? It's like a hamster on a hamster wheel, and you're trying to keep the rat race going. And then eventually you just hit this plateau and you're just going in the same spot, right? And that's the problem. So hopefully, if you're a follow-up client, this isn't you anymore, where most owners, project managers, salespeople wearing too many hats and they're overwhelmed. They're on notepads and paper or spreadsheets. Some people, still might utilize spreadsheets here and there, depending on what the need is. But if that's the case, I would say come to us. Let's talk about kind of the reporting needs that you need so we can automate a lot of those reportings for you. So hopefully, if you're here on the webinar today, you understand that, you don't want to be a laggard. And so those who are set apart and that are different, they all have these three things in common here. And, the stool is a classic image. To bear the weight of the company, you have these three legs. You have the get work part, you have the do the work, the operations part or project management part, and then you have the administration part, which is keeping score and helping. It gives you the roadmap, right? So with my interactions with these companies, they are all structured this way. And I've seen the best, and all of them have a designated sales leader, somebody that the owner can go to and say, hey, this is your responsibility. And here's what they say: if everybody's in charge, then no one's in charge, right? You need even if it's, the most senior salesperson, it's worth it to pay them 5-10 grand more to have that manager mentality, right? It is 100% worth it. Because they get the ship in order. So, here he doesn't wear that jersey anymore, but it's having a quarterback for your offense team, right? When Tom Brady was on the Patriots, it lives or dies based on the quarterback, right? And he's responsible for getting points on the board, and that's his main goal. Obviously, now since he's left, they're struggling in a lot of ways. But here we go. We have a leader focused on putting points on the board, and they're not distracted with other things, mainly project management, maybe some administrative work. Those are the common things that I see a lot of companies get distracted with. But they're focused on getting points on the board, meaning signed contracts, signed deals. Next, the best ones are great with people. They're sales oriented. I see this a lot where they don't have a designated salesperson, and that the salesperson is the chief estimator, or they're estimating. But here's the thing: with sales and estimating, those can be two separate functions. Usually an estimator, someone who's very detailed oriented and very in the nitty gritty. Maybe you're using an estimating tool and you're designing, a new roof system, a new HVAC system, and the detail of an estimate is so critical. Most people with a sales personality don't care about details, and they're great with people. It's really hard to find somebody that is that kind of combination. So it's easier to find someone that is just great with people and they're great in that area, right? So next, they drive results. If they have one sole responsibility, getting points on the board, then everything is driving in that direction, and they're just focused. And when you're focused, you have better results. Play to win, right? They're disciplined, they're committed, and they know the numbers come as a result of the fundamentals of the discipline, right? So maybe you're not worried about touchdowns, but you're worried about moving the ball. You're worried about first downs, right? If you keep on getting first downs, you're going to get touchdowns, right? If you keep on setting up client meetings, you're going to get contracts, right? So that is what a sales leader is focused on. So if you don't have a sales leader in place, critical to have that, write it down on the list, because it's, a sales organization will live or die based on that. Which leads to our next point. They're focused on the fundamentals. So you can see this this little image that I found here. The fundamentals, it allows you to build on one another, right? And then you can do some amazing things when you have processes in place and your fundamentals are solid. You can create an amazing structure, like the case study at the end here. You know, they had a sales manager for about 5 or 6 years that really catalyzed the company from 9 million to 50 million, and then he left to start his own company. But because the fundamentals is what they were built on, everybody at the company had the fundamentals drilled into them. When the sales leader left, they didn't miss a beat. Why? Because the rest of the team knew the fundamentals, and a new sales manager was able to come into place, continue with the fundamentals, and they're still growing. So I'll talk more about that here in a minute. And so what are the fundamentals? Number one, they have goals. They have goals in place. Again, the rudder to see where you're going, or the map to see where you're going. They have weekly sales meetings. They keep their team engaged with KPIs. KPIs, if you don't know, key performance indicators. This is what the Followup CRM report card is really critical to help you. Like, how many bids are you sending out? How many contracts are you winning? How many meetings are you having? How many follow-ups are you doing? How many takeoffs and estimates, etc.? Those are KPIs. And so the best know, if I have 10 meetings a week, I will have 10 contracts at the end of the month, right? So a sales leader can help drive these fundamentals. And then they have a standardized documented sales process. So, and the real purpose behind this is it really gets the knowledge out of the person's head onto paper, so that everybody knows what the next step is, and then they don't have to be bogging other people down with questions, with how do I do this, how do I do that. So documenting your process, and then it's always being tweaked, so updating along the way according to your best practices is critical. Next, the best all keep score, right? So KPIs, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are those KPIs that most people are keeping track of? They're right here: meetings, proposals, decision meetings, referrals. If you're not tracking these at a minimum, then you don't have the full picture. I would encourage you, if you're here today, go into Followup, find your best salesperson, look at their report card, see how many meetings and proposals and referrals they're doing, all the sales behaviors that are critical to you, and have that be your benchmark for success for the rest of your team, right? So if your best sales guy is doing 10 meetings a week, then set that for the rest of the team. That's what a sales leader does, and then keep people accountable to that goal of 10 sales meetings per week. So that is critical. Another KPI is proposals against goal, meaning this comes in with your closing ratio. I'm just going to do easy numbers. Let's say your contract goal is $100,000 and your closing ratio is 33%. What does that mean? That you need to be bidding, you need to have proposals of a value of at least $333,000, right? So 3 times that amount, because if you bid $333,000 and your closing ratio is 33%, then you will meet your objective of $100,000. And here's where the sales meeting comes into play. Let's say you're week 3 of the month and you've only bid 150 grand, so you're behind. Then the sales manager can step in and say, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? Let's get these numbers where they should be. And then of course that flows into your contracts against goal, gross margin against goal, and then your closing ratio. So those are some best practices that I've seen that you have to have, that we help provide for you. Now, the next thing here is the standing sales meeting. It's critical. Sales meetings are established with a standard time with the entire team. So Monday morning, 8 o'clock, have business development in there, have everybody that needs to be critical in there. And then they have a printed agenda that controls the flow of the meeting. A lot of people have very unstructured sales meetings. What I mean is they get together, they talk about this or that, and then they talk about whatever is on fire for the week. And then how are we gonna put this fire out, that fire out? But if you run your sales meeting that way, it's not gonna be too productive. So it's important. We're actually designing a report called the sales meeting report, where it goes over, it puts all these best practices together in a nice printable report for you that says, what do the leads look like this week? What do the pipeline look like this week? What do the contracts look like this week? And then what do the activities look like this week? So that is your printed agenda, and you roll it out. And then every week you go over those 4 items. That brings a little bit of structure to what you're doing on your weekly sales meeting. And so then after that, you could talk about all the fires, because you have to talk about fires, right? So, and how to deal with those issues. But it is, very important to, if you're not going over these things weekly, then things are falling through the cracks, guaranteed. Next, they are fanatical about leads. The top sales team, fanatical about leads. What do I mean by that? They go over their leads and they know answers to questions like these. How many leads came into the business last week, right? So I was just talking to Greg Wallach, Best Roofing, and he said, yeah, we got 34 leads last week. I'm like, great, that's, you know your numbers, right? From there, where did those leads come from, right? Did they come from seeing a truck? Did they come from this advertising or that, or a trade show, whatever it is? Where did they come from? Who was assigned that lead? So who is responsible for taking that lead and sending the proposal, doing the takeoff the estimate, and closing the contract? Was it qualified? And what are the next steps? Was a meeting set up? Was a takeoff date scheduled? What is this next step? So this is, the proverbial conveyor belt. If somebody is interested and they took the initiative to reach out, are you managing your leads well? Do you know where your leads are at after you hand them off? It's critical, because the money is in the leads. Okay. From here, the best of the best have, this is a really great principle, peer-driven team. And this is what I mean. When you have your sales meeting established weekly and your team is meeting all together, the sales manager does not have to lead that meeting, because it's printed. You have it right there. You have the structure. Have the salespeople present to the rest of the sales team what they're doing for that week. And that's what peer-driven accountability means. There's visibility of activities and results. So here's an example. Let's say Casey Fletcher here that I have a screenshot. Let's pretend, actually his dashboard looks very good. This was taken just this morning. You can see not many things are late here, but he has some activity to do today, right? But let's pretend all of these things in red were old, a week or 2 old. Monday morning rolls around and he throws this up on the screen and has to present this to the rest of his team. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. He's going to make sure his dashboard is clean and his homepage is reflecting correctly, so that when he's presenting to the rest of the team, he's not embarrassed, right? So having that peer-driven team accountability is great. So it allows everybody to be the bad guy instead of one person being the bad guy, right? So I would definitely encourage you, and it sharpens so many other things like your presentation skills, and it has everything clean and in order when they do that. So really great hack, if you want to call it, for you to implement at your company. Next, related to that, transparent goals, right? So if a salesperson is presenting, oh, look, last month, right here, I was short of my goal. I didn't hit my quota. Man, if you're presenting that 3 months in a row and you're having issues, it's time to ask for help or to get help. If, on the other hand, let's say you're hitting your goals every month, or you are overachieving, it's time to celebrate that person or ask, what are you doing to get these results, right? So having that peer driven accountability plus transparency allows for a lot of, that's where the magic happens, if that makes sense, right? So if you have, like, imagine your best salesperson up there and they're killing it and they have all their goals shown, then people start to ask questions. How did you do this? How do you have time for that? How do you manage this situation or that situation? And you can see here, last month, he was a little short of his goal. And so look at November, he's already met his activities requirement. So I'm sure by the end of the month here, he's going to hit his goal for November. Why? Peer driven, transparent goals. Next, they know how to track their pipeline, right? They know the flow from when a job first comes their way, that is a year out, that is warm 6 months out, that is hot, they're getting ready, and then contracts in the next 30 days. How to manage that pipeline. And what I mean by track and manage your pipeline, what I really mean is the intensity of your follow-up and checking in with the client. Here's what I mean. If you have a bid that comes your way and they're not going to make a decision till sometime next year, maybe you want to check in quarterly, email them once a month, schedule your follow-up, not even once a month, maybe every other month or once a quarter or something like that, just to make sure that they know that you're on their mind. Now, as we get closer and it's warm, maybe every month, right? Once a month. Hey, how's it going? Need anything from me? Can we schedule a meeting? And then when it's hot, you're on them like white on rice, right? You're setting up multiple client meetings, you're building that relationship, and then that is when they give you a yes or no on the contract, whether they're moving forward or not. So it's critical to understand that. So again, case study, talked about Best Roofing a lot, but here, Greg Wallach's the owner, but his son, Zach Wallach, he was actually the designated sales leader that Greg appointed. And before that, Greg was the sales leader, right? But he wore multiple hats, right? He did everything, right? As the owner, he does everything. And back in 2009, the revenue was $8.7 million. But when you're running everything and you hit that threshold, I call this phase, around this revenue stage, you start to feel the growing pains, right? When you're becoming, when you move from an adolescent to an adult, you start to feel different pains. And that's when it starts to, where you need to mature as a company, right? And then closing ratio was 18%. So when Zach was established as a designated sales leader, the growth really started to happen for this company. From there, 2016, banner year, they hit 47 million in sales. You can see that's a picture of a team huddle they had. So Greg was able to work on the local market. Rather than being in the business, he was able to work on the business. And what that means is Greg was able to speak at this trade show, this property management trade show, this and that, and start to build out his executive management team, right? So work on the business instead of in the business, increased his closing ratio to 45%, grew 507%, 540% over 7 years, 30 to 40% growth a year, which is it's fast, but it's a nice stable growth. Now they're going to hit 65 million in revenue this year, 34% closing ratio. And you can see their closing ratio dropped about 10%, but they're still climbing on the revenue side. Zach was the one that actually left Best Roofing, started his own roofing company, and it's been really cool to see that transition from Zach to now the new sales leader, and still see the fundamentals play itself out you know, at this company. And I've seen this time and time and time again. So if you have any questions about what was presented here today, you want to learn more about how to take your sales team to the next level, I'd be happy to you know, hop on a call or, you know, tell you more about what I've learned. But that's what we have here for Contractors Roundtable today. Thank you all for joining, and talk to you soon.